Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who is investigating Donald Trump's alleged efforts to overturn his election loss in Georgia, is expected to present her case to a grand jury next week. So, of course, Trump is lashing out at her as his fourth indictment looms.
They say there's a young woman, a young racist in Atlanta. She's a racist. And they say, I guess, they say that she was after a certain gang and she ended up having an affair with the head of the gang or a gang member. And this is a person that wants to indict me. She's got a lot of problems, but she wants to indict me to try and run for some other office.
Okay. So all of that was bogus and completely untrue. But let's just pause on the part where he accuses Willis of having an affair with a gang member. Why would he think that or say that? And why would he put that baseless claim in a campaign ad released last week?
Biden's newest lackey, Atlanta DA, Fani Willis. So corrupt, Willis got caught hiding a relationship with a gang member she was prosecuting.
Again, bogus, baseless, and completely untrue. Moments ago, NBC obtained an email sent from Fani Willis to her staff responding to the Trump ad. She slammed the ad as derogatory and false and urges her staff to remain focused. The ad tries to add legitimacy to the claim by sourcing a Rolling Stone article from January, written by music and culture writer Andre G. Here's the article, which talks about how Fani Willis, back in 2019, served as defense attorney to an Atlanta-based rapper named YSL Mondo. Now, here's the context. Mondo is a co-founder of the rap group YSL Crew, whose most famous member is rapper Young Thug, who now prosecutor Fani Willis has indicted along with multiple members of the YSL Crew in a sweeping RICO case that alleges that they are not a rap crew, they are a gang. See where this is going? And note again that Willis was not Mondo's prosecutor at the time, as the Trump ad claims. She was his defense lawyer. The Rolling Stone piece does not in any way say or even suggest that the two had a relationship outside of their professional one, meaning Trump is doing what Trump does, taking a fragment of something that is true, that Fani Willis knows YSL Mondo, and twisting it into a perverse false claim in order to defame and discredit her in a way that is particular to her being a woman, and a black woman at that. And with Trump, it's rarely clear whether he actually believes the lies he tells, since history has shown us that he'll believe anyone who confirms his silly putty logic and tells him what he wants to hear. And in this case, Trump isn't the only one peddling this false claim about Fani Willis. A Trump-supporting, not so respectful of women, hip-hop podcaster named DJ Academics has a role in spreading this lie as well. He promoted the claim on X Twitter today. And here he is with Trump at a UFC fight in April. Now, we on the show are not saying DJ Academics is who played the John Eastman, Rudy Giuliani role in this lie that Trump has adopted. I'm just saying with Trump, any bad source is possible. Joining me now is Paul Butler, MSNBC legal analyst and a former federal prosecutor, and the aforementioned Andre G., staff writer for Rolling Stone. Before I get to you, Andre, for 1 second, I just have to ask you, Paul, because I asked you off camera, I want to ask you on camera. That is a lie that Donald Trump is telling, and he told it in an ad. Fani Willis is a public figure. I know it's usually hard for a public figure to sue for defamation, but could she?
It's a really high standard. Ironically, it's conservatives who are trying to lower the bar. But this is an outrageous lie. It actually could get DA Willis disbarred. It's unethical to have a relationship with a client, but it didn't happen. It's just another one of his racist dog whistles, just like he called DA Alvin Bragg an animal. Racist is his insult of choice for black prosecutors. He called DA Bragg and also Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, racist as well, when we all know who the real racist is.
Yeah, flipping that word on its head. Oh, Andre, welcome to the show. So your article is what Donald Trump is using kind of as the basis for this claim. You wrote about the relationship, such as it was, between Fani Willis and YSL Mondo. What was that relationship?
Yeah, so Ms. Willis, she represented Mondo during a 2019 aggravated assault case during a brief stint where a brief break from her prosecutorial career where she had her own practice. And yeah, she represented him. She was his defense attorney But yeah, I want to be clear, like at no point during our conversation or in my report did he imply that there was anything romantic that went on between them. He said that they had like a mother, son, auntie to nephew kind of relationship at points. Like she was a mentor figure. She, would give him advice, I guess, to keep him on the right track, so to speak, here and there. But again, there was no implication of anything unethical during their relationship, their professional relationship.
And there's even like a piece to your story where she kind of warns him, stay on the right path because, if I go back to be the prosecutor, I'm going to come for you. Like trying to tell him don't get in trouble. So it's like, yeah, this is like a auntie kind of relationship. But to imply that it's some sort of sexual relationship seems really bizarre. But really to stay with you for a second, Andre, this is not the only kind of hip hop connection to Florida, to the Georgia connection to Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the election. I mean, at one point, Kanye West's publicist is who is going after these two black women who are doing nothing other than being good citizens and attempting to, be Georgia election workers, for which there's now a lawsuit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in late 2021, there were, like you said, there were two women who, Ruby Freeman was one of the women who alleged that Kanye West's publicist came to her house and accused her of electoral misconduct and basically tried to pressure her into admitting that she committed election fraud. But in December 2021, a Kanye West representative told Reuters, who broke the initial story, that the publicist was no longer working or wasn't working for Kanye at the time that she did it, or that she visited Ms. Freeman.
The thing that is so sort of bizarre, Paul, is number one, Donald Trump seems like he'll believe anyone who tells him what he wants to hear, right? So when Cheeseborough, this guy Cheeseborough tells him, hey, you know what, you can just have different electors. He's like, good, I love it. Giuliani says, hey, you can just say Venezuela, somebody came up out of the grave, or Maduro did it to you. Great, I'll take that. He'll take anyone who will, tell him what he wants to hear. But in this case, I have to play this for you. This is what he was actually told by Brad Raffensperger, who would know in Georgia about election fraud. Here it is.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong. We talked to the congressmen, and they were surprised, but I guess there was a person named Mr. Raynard that came to these meetings and presented data. And he said that there was dead people, I believe it was upward of 5,000. The actual number were two people that were dead that voted. And so that's wrong. That was two.
And so can it be a defense for Donald Trump, if he is prosecuted in Georgia, that he just sincerely believed the Looney Tune lawyers who told him there was election fraud, with Giuliani, who said that Ruby Freeman and her daughter were essentially acting like drug dealers, that he believed that, he just didn't believe Brad Raffensperger, who was the state official who would have known? Is that a defense?
He can make that defense, but the jury is unlikely to credit it. If a belief is reasonable, it's much more likely to be seen as credible by jurors. But if Trump is specifically asking the Georgia Secretary of State to find him 11,780 votes because that's how much he needs to get the election overturned, that's not a search for truth. That's him trying to stay in office by any means necessary. The problem with these insults to people like Fani Willis, there are two legal problems. Maybe they work with his political base, but a judge is likely to be concerned about witness intimidation and whether he's trying to infect the jury pool. And the other problem we already know, including from your first segment, when Donald Trump threatens people, violence sometimes follows. He made threats on January 6th, and then an element of his supporters tried to murder. They were looking to murder the vice president and the Speaker of the House at the Capitol.
Let's play what Fani Willis has been receiving, the incoming she's gotten since Donald Trump started talking about her.
All the typical racial slurs that you can imagine. They're very grotesque things. We're on family television. I don't even know that I like to say all of them, but slave horror is one of them. I've probably been called the N-word more times in the last 2.5 years than most 100 people combined.
And I think we might have the picture of what the courthouse looks like right now in Atlanta because of Donald Trump supporters. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, the fact that Donald Trump is targeting her and now essentially trying to call her, there it is, unethical, and claiming she had a sexual relationship with a gang member, which sounds to me like some racist BS.
It's racist, it's sexist, and it's classic Donald Trump. Another black woman who is not his favorite right now is Judge Chunkin. And I think that in insisting that this hearing on the protective order be this week, she's signaling her concern about what Trump may say or do. We saw the kind of protection that's around the Atlanta courthouse. Reportedly, the U.S. Marshals have had to up their security detail of Judge Chunkin as well. So, you know, they're entirely legitimate concerns about Trump running for office and being able to say some things about January 6th, but he cannot continue this pattern of threatening witnesses. If you come after me, I'll come after you.
Yeah.
Judge Chunkin is not going to have that.
At some point, Donald Trump has to live somewhat within the law and the way that the rest of us will be expected to behave. Paul Butler and Andre G. Thank you, Andre. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for all of your reporting. Thank you. That was the basis of this whole story today. By the way, a shameless plug alert. If you want to understand more about the intersection of hip hop and politics, check out our Readout blog feature, Hip Hop is Universal, at msnbc.com/hip hop. Jahan Jones is doing some amazing journalism there.